We shall get right into it. How about that? Okay, so again, this talk is about decentralized, self-organizing socioeconomic systems. People call them DAOs or DACs. I have a problem with that because when you say autonomous organization, if you look at Ethereum's DAO, which was just a huge scam essentially, where a number of people put in money into a system that they thought would be secure and work and lost, over $60 million. There needs to be human interaction, human behavior involved in it, and accountability. And ultimately, when coin blocking first became a thing, people were excited about it. It was like, decentralize everything. Nobody is going to be in control, right? But as we've seen, nobody in control doesn't work for governments. It doesn't work for big corporations. None of the governments that I've spoken with, nor the big Fortune 500 corporations I've spoken with, would operate their entity on an open platform that was not secure. And I'll go in why it's not secure in a few moments. But ultimately, we're looking at decentralization in the manner of governance and the utilization of the blockchain to help ensure transparency and accountability, essentially. So the itinerary of this talk, I'm gonna introduce why I even have the credentials to be speaking about this, the problems blockchains can solve when implemented properly, the thoughts and considerations of the ecosystem as it stands, and then an explanation of what the perfect system looks like. So I'm Xavier Hawk. I have done really well in investing in commodities, land, cryptocurrency. I've got a number of assets under management in a private SPV that's some fun stuff. And I'm one of the first early entrepreneurs in the space. Like I said, I was the first guy to architect an asset-backed cryptocurrency with a basket of assets. This is pre-blockchain capital, pre-Libra. Those guys looked at my work, and I didn't have the resources at the time or the know-how, really. I came from farming and music, but I have a very keen mind and an understanding for these kinds of systems and abstract system and reasoning in general. And so I went and designed that first architected asset-backed cryptocurrency with a basket of assets, currencies, commodities, land, and business, essentially. And the volatility between those would create a mean average and therefore a stable coin, which people calling stable coins now. Back then, I was calling it an asset-backed cryptocurrency. So I was also the first to negotiate a cryptocurrency or blockchain for a sovereign nation. It was actually the ASEAN Trade Pact Alliance in Southeast Asia to trade, to clear their transactions daily. What I found out is they didn't want it to be cleared daily because they were making money on the margins, right? So I ended up working with the chief architect of the Euro, Bernard Liotard, who came and saw my talks and had his people contact me. And he said to me, he was like, how long have you known my work? And I actually had no idea who he was. And he said, you've taken my currency concept and improved upon it. And it has already been demonstrated in think tanks in Germany to anybody who uses this currency or this system, it would end poverty for the users. And you've improved upon it. Can I work with you? And I said, please, yes, and it took my profile from zero to hero very quickly. And then I had to deal with a lot of spies and like weird hooky spooky spy stuff. When you go from nobody to all of a sudden hanging out with heads of state and, presidents and prime ministers and finance ministers, all of a sudden everybody's asking questions. Who are you? So in 2014, the SEC labeled me as a time when you didn't want that to be the case as a security. And we were like, whoa, hold the fort. There were some things that went on with Ethereum and all of these other guys. And, I was like, I'm going to watch what happens to them. I don't want to do this illegally and have, any backlash 5 years later from the SEC. So we paused permacredits at that time and waited to see how the market moved. And it just so happened that the market collapsed at that moment when I said no. And then when I decided to get back in and retooled everything as FireOn, we came up with a way to fund this as with a Fire token, which is an a dividend-paying token. So that's how I'm here. I've been thinking about blockchains and blockchain governance and decentralized systems for a very long time, from the ground up, literally in the garden. So the problems today that we have are obviously poverty, the allocation of human resources, the improper allocation of human resources or just resources in general to the proper humans. And that is because we have corruption at some of the highest levels where people are not accountable, or the system is not serving us any longer to hold these people accountable. I'll show you how we hold people accountable in a system like FIRON. Banking, you have corrupt bankers and people who are funding wars and funding institutions and social movements for their own social engineering and civil engineering and global agendas. And so therefore, corruption and unaccountability in governance. So then along comes blockchain and Bitcoin, and I'm going to explain why a fully decentralized system like Bitcoin is not going to work, because of the points that I'll get into in a little bit. And ultimately slavery. We've got human trafficking and the economic slavery of the humans who are taking part in the governance and economic system. So we need to own those. Right now, our taxes are harvested from us economically, and our transaction fees are harvested from us economically by people like the government, by people like Square, MasterCard, Visa, PayPal, and all of these other payment processors. What happens when we own that, and we as a group own that, as a membership, as a cooperative? So that's going to be the solution, right? So the reality of decentralized systems like Bitcoin are a fallacy, simply because the main coders for the Bitcoin blockchain, right, they all work for the same corporation. I think the last I looked, it was like 6 of them all work for the same corporation and foundation. So there could be groupthink going on there. If the blockchain, the Bitcoin blockchains decides to get forked, like what Xavier did with Bitcoin Cash, it affects us, but we have no say in how that it affects us, or that it happens at all. It's in the hands of a few individuals, just like all of the systems in our legacy systems, right? And then on top of that, the miners, most of the biggest mining organizations are located in China and Russia. And there are, again, 6 of the biggest ones. And if they decide to call up each other and be like, hey, we're not going to process this transaction, then it is an unsecure system. So there needs to be human accountability and management and governance of this thing. And this is where the genius of FIRON comes in. So you've got Google, Apple, Facebook, HR. What I'm getting at here is that they look at humans as the human resource. There's a reason that it's called human resources, as corporations decide who they're going to bring on and who they're not, because you are the resource and they are the beneficiaries of your lifestyle, your calories, your hours, your passion, and you're providing them with a service that's paying you per hour. And the corporations of the future are going to be like I described with FIRON, or as if you've seen in movies like where they travel to Jupiter or whatever. I can't remember the name of it, but it was Chris Pratt and the lady from the To Kill a Mockingbird. No, not To Kill a Mockingbird. What's that movie? I pledge, oh God. Well, anyway, you know what I'm talking about. So that leads us to a fascist dystopia if it's run by the wrong people. It's like the social credit system that they've got in China, complete lockdown security. You have no free will in the decisions that you want to make. You can't communicate with one another openly and freely on their internet platforms like WeChat. We need to have an internet bill of rights here that protects our free speech online, because that's the #1 way we communicate. So, we need to make it also as easy to use as PayPal. So everybody knows how to use Facebook and Instagram and all these things. So you have to build this platform on a social platform that everybody's already trained to use. Then you create a security token for the investors to get involved. They don't have an extra vote for their input. They are a member owner just like everybody else, but they benefit first from being able to have been there to support the system in its early days. So truly decentralized voting system works on a blockchain. You set up a yes wallet, a no wallet, abstain wallet, and you issue a disintegrating token that disappears in 4 days. And you provide people with a incentive to vote so that they go and they put their coin. Once they've watched the videos, they get their coin. Once they get educated on the topic, they get their coin. Once they vote, then they get a little bit of extra social merit to their system because they're valuable to the system. And then the rewards that they get from the system increase. And sometimes they can even have their vote or their say louder because of liquid democracy. People can then give them their tokens and they'll gain that prestige and social merit. So it's got to be commons owned, that is to say a membership cooperative, kind of like REI, where you're a member owner and you put in your KYC, you get your proper tax forms and all of this, and then you become a part owner and therefore get to steer the corporation. What we've created is an ERM, just essentially a resource management system that you could use asynchronously. So you then create a stable priced asset-backed internal currency. And if you have vendors like Starbucks or any of these corporations, they become member owners as well. And then you, as an individual, you use your Earth credit and you give them, you buy your latte there from the point of sale system. And what ends up happening is that Firon, the corporation, then gives them a transfer at the end of the day, clearing, kind of like what Visa and MasterCard does. But we're handling the transactions, harvesting all of the economic horsepower of everybody involved, but doing with it, imagine if you could choose where your taxes go. We do with it what the population of member owners decide they want it to be. So there's a number of amazing things we can do with that. We can buy businesses, we can build schools, we can leverage our group collective horsepower or economic power and hire lawyers and do class actions against corporations. Once we are not separated and are able to organize effectively together in a system that's efficient, that matches and mimics the current economic system, but that we own, the power of that is astronomical. What we can do in the geological blink of an eye is really shift the direction of this planet, and people can feel like they're taking part in it. So we can reward and pay members for their behaviors. We can create a universal basic income if that's what people want to do. We maintain private data by separating information on different bulkheads or different blockchains. So your personal ID is on one chain, but there's no information that's tied to it. Then your financial data is on another chain, but there's no ID that's attached to it. Your medical data is on one blockchain, but there's no ID that it's attached to it, so it's HIPAA compliant. What ends up happening there is you get a dongle, like a little NFC chip, that is your key into the system. So we know that it's you. You are responsible for your private data out there. You're responsible for all of your own individual things, so you're responsible for your access here. And it costs money to join, so we keep the trolls down, or the people who are trying to take down the system. There's a number of, that I won't get into, but there's a number of ways that we code preventative measures for game theory so that people can't take over and change the system. It costs money to do this. It costs money to do that. You get rewards for this, and our algorithms and search bots look and see what you're doing and see if there's any behaviors that deviate from the norm in a great deal. So again, it's not about the specific chain, it's about the proper utilization of all the different chains for their activities. I've just realized that we've got, I guess a half an hour, 45 minutes to do this. So I'm gonna move a little quicker, okay? So it's a blockchain-based administrative platform, essentially, that looks and feels like a social app. And what we have is voting that takes place that determines how the system grows and in which directions that we do. So it's a truly consensus-based model, not based on democracy, 51%, two wolves and a sheep voting on what's for dinner. But if you're familiar with governance and how, I'll get into it a little bit here, you need to have a quorum or a minimum amount of people to make a vote viable and be able to go through. So in the system, it's all based on phi, the golden ratio, right? That's why it's called Firon. And it's sort of like fire on, right? That internal fire, get active, be proactive, take part in the systems that you like, have a say in how the world is developed. So it's based on the phi ratio. So the quorum is a phi ratio of the number of members, and the vote is a phi ratio of the quorum. So it's more than 67%. It's more than a democratic vote. It's a consensus vote. So it also, you're able to get a secure ID, like I mentioned, by having an online identifying blockchain-based ID marker that is secured to your NFC dongle, yeah? So it's a cashless marketplace, and then we have, I'll get into it later, but great mass data that you can look at, and you can see all the marketplace transactions take place on one blockchain, and they're not tied to individuals, but you can get the general scope of statistics of the data. So again, like I said, secure voting with blockchain tokens that disappear after 4 days that you have to do things to get, and then you have a truly unhackable voting system because you can't fabricate these tokens. And you can also do this really cool thing where, based on a person's score, on their actual credit score, like you have normally, you can actually automate. And if there's a pool of money, we can, as a corporation, vote and say, 1/10% we put aside for loans that people want, individual loans, whatever it might be. And based upon their credit scores, their loans can be automated, and then the payments can be automated and taken back right out of their wallet. This gets into some sticky stuff, but so long as the system is run and managed by the people, it becomes a very cool thing. And all the governments that I'm working with, they love this, because if you can de-frictionize their taxes, right, that's what they want. They want their money of their people. And then ultimately the system is based on merit. If any of you are familiar with role-playing games, you get statistics in your character sheet, and you advance and you do different things, and your skill trees open up and all of this. Well, what we do is we gamify corporate socioeconomic life. That means that we've taken the work of Gregory Landau and in their 8 forms of capitalism, or the 8 forms of capital, added a 9th one. And so you have different value to the system, not just your financial capital, but your social capital, your spiritual capital, your educational capital, your material capital, and so on. And those are your base scores. You answer a series of questions, and it gives you your scores. And then anybody who is your friend, in order for them to be your friend and in your circle of trust, they have to answer those questions about you as well. And so the mean average of all of your friends' views in accordance with your own gives you your basic 8, 9 different verticals of scoring. And then when you behave in the system, much like grade school grading lessons, you're rated for the things that you do, or the contributions that you do, like this talk. Let's say if I were to give this talk, then you guys would be like, yeah, dope ass shit. And then you give me 5 stars or whatever. That goes towards my grade. And over the course of time, that changes, and I'm able to determine my course in the corporation and in life in general. So my goal is eventually to get this into Tesla's hands, Elon Musk's hands for SpaceX when we go to space, because systems like this are going to be necessary for organizing and self-organizing. So it's frictionless. The frictionless taxation means they can just go right into your wallet and pull it out. And that could be very much abused. And so we have to be able to do that on an agreement basis, where it's on your transactions, and also if you have a loan, it automatically takes like a fraction of your reserves as you go. So it decreases. I can't see what that says because we're in the way. Hold on 1 second. There we go. Decreases fraud because everything becomes transparent, right? And it reduces terrorism because you are able to see who's behaving in what ways. It's hard to hide your behaviors in a way, like there are systems right now for biometrics where, based upon the music that you stream, and based upon where your phone is, or how many steps you walk this way, they can actually determine whether it's you or not. There's systems being deployed in Africa right now that use your voice, that use your gait, the way that you walk up to the camera, and all of these things to actually determine your ID. And then it reduces bureaucratic spending. If you can automate all of these different things like taxation, like microloans and all of this, then you have a system that runs very smoothly. And then the representatives, the people who are running the company, who have jobs in the company, are basically like the janitors. And if they have influence and say over the system, and they're doing a bad job, and you rate them poorly, they lose their access token, which gives them the parts of the website which they actually function in. So if everybody decides, hey, we want to support this company and give them money or whatever it is, then what is it called? The council, the people who are running the company, the executors of the people's will, they have to come together and sign a thing and sign into the trust and access, release access to the funds. If they're doing a bad job in this and they lose that token, then they automatically don't have access to their job. So it gives people real accountability in a very frictionless way. So secure online ID, you can do an iris scan, you can do the biometrics that I talked about, facial recognition, thumbprint, all of that. And we can actually provide a government issued ID. And we can test this in places like Puerto Rico or Egypt. We have a contract right now with one of the biggest countries in the Middle East, and we're going to be able to provide them a centralized banking system, which is essentially this. They probably won't use it for the freedom and democracy and beauty that it will be able to be used, but it'll fund the rest of it so that we can deploy it positively globally. So again, I want to state, like, I talked to governments and I talked to a lot of corporations, and nobody wants to use a public chain for the reasons that I stated earlier, but also because you need to control the ingress and egress of people who join the system. They need to be accountable and held accountable, and they need to be able to pay taxes in their jurisdictions and all of this. So what we're able to do is privatize a blockchain, which nobody really likes, but if you look at Ripple, they're doing it very well, and they're going to do huge numbers this year. They're handling Bank of America's transactions, Scotland, Bank of Scotland, Royal Bank of Saudi Arabia, MoneyGram, which handles Walmart's transactions. So we're looking at a good use case of a centralized blockchain that is managed in a decentralized manner. Not so much with the case of Ripple, but in the case of FIRON. So it's not broadly hackable. Like I was saying, you bulkhead the data in such a way that if they hack one of the chains of transaction data, they just get random transactions, but they can't tie it to anybody individually. And this is super secure and what we need, essentially. And so you can then provide a secure government ID on this and basically a passport. And what you can have is when you open up your app, you switch, like if you go to one country to another country, you switch the country, you swipe left or right or pick the right country and jurisdiction, and you're still interoperable with the currency. It automatically algorithmically trades the currency that you step into, and you can designate how much you want and all of this. So it's really interesting in being able to bring the world together in that way. And then so also you can provide driver's license, obviously, and then any client defined parameters that you need. So ultimately you can provide a cashless economy, which is you can still have currency, right? There's going to be places that need that. And in FIRON, it's the heroes of our world, right? Rather than the people who've created systems of control. So you can govern the transactions, you get transparency in the system, you're secured on a private blockchain. You can do this all through ATMs and phones, and then ultimately it's secure, and you can still have cash, like I said. So in mass data, like I was saying with the bulkheaded blockchains, you get to see transparently all of the data that you need to make at a governmental or global level, but without jeopardizing an individual's security and privacy, right? So we use a social platform that everybody's trained on and knows how to use. We have direct contact. That means the president, like Twitter, you can directly contact and tweet them, or they can send a mass broadcast to everybody individually. So you can get important messages from the people who are running the place. And like I said, massive data, this is very appealing to large governments, and immediate metrics on what's happening at that moment. And it cuts terrorism because we observe the behaviors and we can pinpoint things like the way that biometrics can look at your gait and your facial recognition to determine who you are. You actually leave a footprint anywhere that you go in the world. And you can see that on Google. Yeah, it tracks you now, and Facebook tracks you now. So, we do that, but you own it. So it's not like Facebook owns it or somebody, that's making decisions without your consent. And again, it's the merit algorithm that you gamify your corporate life, your corporate socioeconomic life, and you can actually determine an individual's merit. If you've never seen them, you can see what they're good at, what people think about them, and you can actually gauge your determination, and it allows business to go a lot faster because you don't have to go through these situations where, somebody turns out to be a total douche nozzle. So you can also incentivize social circles. Let's say you get together with a group of people and you want to conduct some kind of business or some kind of organization. You want to grow a garden for the community, and you join like a Facebook group. Well, we can incentivize and see what Facebook groups or what FIRON groups are doing really well, and then be like, how can we support you? We see that you're doing some really amazing shit. How can we support you, right? And then again, like I said, automated microloans, and it becomes very intuitive how to use the system. So,
what do you mean by ownership? If you own your data, how can you'll be able to provide the permissions for everything
yes, essentially, yeah, like what Facebook does, in the sense that you can see what your data is being used for, in the Facebook apps and whatever. But with this system, it means that we're not selling your data. That's it. Like Facebook is selling your data
without your permission, unless you wanted them to sell your data.
Correct. And in fact, if you want them to sell your data and you want to be marketed to by big companies, and they have to pass a certain criteria, then you can say, yes, I acquiesce to this, and then you'll get paid for it, micro bits, you know what I'm saying? Micro credits each time that happens. So you're actually incentivized and financially remunerated for your life, you know, for your behavior and life force. So if you don't mind, I'll go through this and we'll have a little bit of time at the end for questions and answers, but I love that. Thank you, Olivia. So the secure voting is non-hackable, like I described, using a blockchain and tokens. The valueless tokens that disappear after 4 days, real-time tracking of it. It prevents voter fraud, vote payments. The tokens aren't worth anything. You can pass them on and create a liquid democracy if you want for somebody else to pay attention and you to just kind of ride along, and prevents violent vote swaying. It doesn't cost anything. There's no backdoor tampering, and it's easy to use. In the same way that you would send a token to somebody else, you just vote that way. After you watch the video, you get the token, and after you watch the video and are answering a couple questions to show that you're at least knowledgeable enough to take part in the discussion, then you're issued the token. You can do with it what you please. You can give it to somebody or you can vote for it yourself, and then you get rewarded for that. You get paid for it, and it goes and adds onto your merit system. So this is the part that the government's really like, the frictionless taxation. You can basically, like the United States used to be based on a sales tax thing. There was no income tax, there was no property tax or any of these things. And it was just sales tax that the country ran on. And we in the early 1900s and 1800s, we did like phenomenally, right? But then they added all these different taxations on. Well, you can do that now with transaction fees. And you can also have agreements with the corporation that like, okay, with FIRE-ON, that is to say, that every year we pay a membership due of 1 day's wages in whatever country we're in, so that it evens the level playing field. And or you can say, you know, we agreed to give an extra 1% of our yearly earnings to the corporation. Whatever it is, we come up with the rules, right? But it creates frictionless taxation, right? And it's transparent. We see where it's going. We vote on where that money goes. It's imagine if you got to choose where your taxes in the United States went. What would we do differently, right? So this is a way that we can actually do that more efficiently than the current systems of governance. So it makes tax evasion impossible, and there's no big bureaucratic waste with a huge organization like the IRS or the time that it takes for it to all happen. It costs nothing, it's code, right? So in fraud prevention, you see the screen here, it's a marketplace. So much like Amazon, we allow products in, but they have to be vetted because we want to make sure that they're corporations that are doing right by the planet, right? So we choose who the corporations are that come in every week or so. You know, there's a vote. Should we let in Nike? Should we let in Adidas? Should we let in Starbucks? Should we let in, you know, mom and pop's permaculture garden? You know, whatever. But then there's a marketplace where you can go and spend your Earth credits, right? And the way it works is like Disney dollars, where you go to Disneyland, you buy 100 Disney dollars and you can spend them at all the stores there. Because it's a membership-owned cooperative and all of these big vendors become part owners, we're able to spend our own private currency in our own wall.